do not go home for August recess until you have passed the CHIPS Act.
What he is telling you point blank is who is the puppet and who is the puppeteer.
In one of the most impressive floor speeches I've seen in some time, Independent Senator Bernie Sanders made a forceful but nuanced critique of the microchip bill as it passed a key bipartisan vote in the Senate. So I have several clips to get to, and they are incredible. This is one of those instant classic Bernie Sanders speeches. Now, it may sound boring on its face, a speech about the CHIPS bill, but I'm telling you, you have to stay to watch some key moments from this 20-minute speech. I'm going to break it down to some, the most important aspects of the speech, and you'll see why it's important, as this is a great representation of what is wrong with Washington politics, and Bernie, of course, makes that connection in this speech as well. And I'll also get to my last clip, not part of the speech, but it gives you a great example of, what is wrong in terms of this bill in particular, but also, again, what is wrong with how corrupt Washington is. So first, let me get to Bernie setting the stage here for what this bill is all about.
This shortage is, in fact, costing American workers good-paying jobs and raising prices for families. And that is why I personally strongly support the need to expand U.S. microchip production. But the question that we should be asking is this: should American taxpayers provide the microchip industry with a blank check of over $76 billion at the same exact time when semiconductor companies are making tens of billions of dollars in profits and paying their CEOs exorbitant compensation packages? That really is one of the questions that we should be asking, and I think the answer to that is a resounding no. This is an enormously profitable industry.
All right, so this speech picks up quite a bit, as you're going to see, but I had to show you this part because it gives you an idea that Bernie is in support of addressing the issue of the microchip shortage. That isn't the problem here. The problem is this corporate giveaway without any actual strings attached. And that's why he had an amendment, which of course the industry fought against, as of course Congress did as an arm of the industry. And I'll get to what he asked for in a second here, but just quickly on this bill, what's in it, what it's about. So as AP News reports here, bill to boost semiconductor industry passes key Senate test, as I told you. So it passed in a 64-32 vote. Every single Democrat voted for it. Of course, Bernie's an independent. He voted against it. Meaning, including people like Elizabeth Warren, who has been critical in the past of Silicon Valley, but when it comes to this, she's totally on board for this corporate giveaway. So it's important to recognize who is willing to, buck the trend here, who is willing to stand out against their colleagues on principle and fighting for what is right, and who isn't. So Elizabeth Warren, again, I'm not trying to single her out here, but she talks a big game. When it comes down to it, is not willing to put the fight out there the way that Bernie is. Now, the bill provides about $52 billion in grants and other incentives for the semiconductor industry, as well as a 25% tax credit for those companies that build chip plants or fabs in the U.S. The cost of the tax break is projected to be about $24 billion over 10 years. The bill also authorizes about $200 billion to enhance scientific research over the same time frame. The Congressional Budget Office has projected that the bill would increase deficits by about $79 billion over 10 years. Critics have objected to the spending called for in the bill, either as misplaced or excessive. So, any other bill that addressed healthcare, expanded healthcare, childcare, dealt with an investment into renewable energies, dealing with the climate crisis, anything to actually help people and society that would increase deficits by $79 billion over 10 years would be ripped to shreds by people like Joe Manchin, by the entire GOP, by most Democrats. Yet here, this passes with the entirety of the Democratic Party, including Joe Manchin, who cares so much about deficits, and also Republicans on board as well. A bipartisan bill. Because It helps massive corporations with no strings attached. That's why. And Bernie will get a lot more into that. But he tried to address that with an amendment to the bill. So the Sanders proposed changes to the CHIPS Act, which cleared a key procedural hurdle in the Senate Tuesday evening, would prohibit companies that receive subsidies under the bill from using the funds to buy back their own stock, offshore U.S. jobs, or crack down on unionization efforts. The senator argues that no strings attached giveaways to the microchip industry would amount to corporate welfare. So first, I want to be clear. These changes are not going to be in the bill. So this sentence is kind of confusing at the beginning, but they're talking about the CHIPS Act itself. So I showed you the vote. That's what they're talking about, that key procedural hurdle. So the CHIPS Act has passed that hurdle. The Bernie changes have not. They're not going to be in the bill, asking to ensure that these corporations don't buy back their own stock, asking to ensure they don't offshore jobs, asking to ensure they don't crack down on unions. This is why these companies have fought against these changes, because they know they are going to do these things. And the entirety, or most of Congress, I should say, is on board with this garbage. It is unfreaking believable that this is just a clear and obvious giveaway to this industry. Nothing else, no other area that would actually help people would have these sorts of no strings attached money. Nothing else. But when it comes to this, they can do whatever the hell they want with this cash, despite the fact that they are incredibly profitable. They can make these investments themselves. These companies don't need this money. But here they are for this giveaway, no strings attached, and will do every single thing that Bernie is telling them not to do. Now, let me set up the next clip here. So this has to do with Mitt Romney. So Mitt Romney is among the likely Republican supporters, and yes, he voted for it. Asked about the Sanders argument against the bill, Romney said that when other countries subsidize the manufacturing of high technology chips, the U.S. must join the club. The U.S. must join the club. Well, Bernie takes this line and runs with it.
Let's join the club. Let's do what not only every major country on earth does in terms of guaranteeing paid family and medical, what virtually all countries, including some of the poorest in the world, do. But I gather problem is that to join those clubs in terms of universal health care, in terms of paid family and medical leave, in terms of free tuition at public colleges and universities, we're going to have to take on powerful special interests, and they make campaign contributions. So that's not what the Senate does. But when it comes to joining the club with other countries giving blank checks to large corporations, that's a club that unfortunately many of my colleagues here feel comfortable in joining.
Isn't it amazing that Mitt Romney made that point and doesn't see the conflict with any other area where he is not willing to join the club? It is just, again, and it's not just Romney. This is almost the entirety of the Senate. This just exposes their corruption, that they will join the club when it comes to corporate giveaways, but when it comes to anything else to help people, not joining the club. So again, look, if this investment was made and, Americans already had universal health care, already had paid family medical leave, already had real investments into the climate crisis, already had, all of these things that actually help people, already had tuition-free college, then, yeah, I guess this wouldn't be as big of a deal as it isn't in other countries that already have those things. But when you have this sort of investment and you don't have investments into anything else, it shows you what the U.S. Congress is there to do. Simply help massive corporations get even further ahead while squeezing the poor and middle class. So let me get to the next clip now, and this is where Bernie adds some historical context to this corporate giveaway.
This is really quite amazing. Over the last 20 years, the microchip industry has shut down over 780 manufacturing plants and other establishments in the United States and eliminated 150,000 American jobs while moving most of its production overseas. And by the way, they did that after they received a federal grant and loans much smaller than what we are talking about today. So Here is the absurd situation that we're in. The crisis is caused by the industry shutting down in America and moving abroad. And today what we are doing is saying we are going to give you a blank check to undo the damage.
So do you see how insane this is? This industry, these massive corporations, they're the ones that offshored these jobs. And now they're demanding Congress to pass this bill so that they get this free money to then invest into the very jobs that they themselves eliminated. So it's just pure benefit for them. They offshore the jobs, they make massive profits because they offshore these jobs, and now they get even more cash to help create new jobs that they themselves may be offshored later because there was no guarantees, there was no strings attached in the bill. It is completely insane. And this is just a Tuesday. Like this is a normal day in Congress. This is how things work. This is the only thing that gets passed is when it helps massive corporations. When there's a bipartisan bill, it's only to benefit massive corporations. I dare you to find one that doesn't. Find me a bipartisan bill from the past 10 years that does not help massive corporations in some way. And Bernie, the only one calling it out. Republicans that are against this bill are against it because it's a Joe Biden bill. They don't actually care about what Bernie's talking about here. Bernie's the only one laying this out and trying to propose changes to the bill that, of course, are not going to be adopted. So just quickly on some examples here before we get to the next clip on what he's talking about. So he goes on to discuss how Intel offshored a bunch of jobs from New Mexico, Texas Instruments as well, a bunch of jobs there, and Micron Technology, more layoffs there. All these companies offshoring jobs and now begging for this corporate giveaway while they themselves are incredibly profitable and could make these investments themselves. Now, let me get to the next clip where Bernie goes more in on the corporate bailout here, or the corporate handout in this bill.
It is estimated in total that 5 major semiconductor companies will receive the lion's share of this taxpayer handout: Intel, Texas Instruments, Micron Technology, Global Foundries, and Samsung. These 5 companies alone made $70 billion in profits. You know, I find it interesting that I've heard senators here on the floor talk about entitlements. When we help working people, when we help poor people, there are all kinds of requirements, work requirements, reporting requirements, drug testing requirements. You name the requirements when the federal government helps working people or low-income people. Well, what are the requirements attached to this handout for large, profitable corporations? The answer is 0. And this is the way a corrupt political system works, and I hope everybody understands it. Over the past 20 years, Intel has spent over $100 million on lobbying and campaign contributions. That's a lot of money, $100 million. But this is what a corrupt political system is about. For $100 million in lobbying and campaign contributions, they're going to get at least $20 billion in corporate welfare. That, I would argue, is a pretty good investment. And that's what goes on here, not only with the microchip industry, it goes on with the pharmaceutical industry, the fossil fuel industry, the insurance industry, huge amounts of money in lobbying and campaign contributions. The pharmaceutical industry has 1,500 paid lobbyists right now, right here in Washington, D.C., which is why we pay the highest prices in the world for prescription drugs.
All right. So Bernie here lays it out, makes the connections to the other industries like fossil fuels, like healthcare, how there are these massive investments into lobbying for these industries in millions, but then it pays off for them in billions. And that's why they make those investments. That's why they buy these politicians. That's why Congress works for massive companies and not for people. And I just want to hit on one other point that he makes there about how, there's no strings attached here for this money, yet when it comes to anything else, when it comes to actually helping people, there's always, means testing, there's always strings attached. An example of that, a perfect example of that, is Biden's potential plan to cancel some student debt. So people that take out, student loans are people that need help to pay for school. So any sort of help for them. These people are not, millionaires. These people need student loans because they need help to pay for school. Well, even in the discussion about canceling maybe $10,000 in student debt, even within that discussion, there is a further discussion about means testing that. So this was a great piece by David Sirota and Andrew Perez here in The Guardian, how Biden isn't serious about forgiving student debt, means testing is a con. So even when it comes to canceling student debt for people that need the help, again, millionaires are not going to college, or no, they are going to college, but they're paying for it. They don't need student loans. People that get out student loans, they need the help. Means testing just 10 grand. Yet when it comes to this industry, microchips, the amount of money these companies make they're currently making, the profits they have, the bonuses the CEO gets, all of this money that this industry has, they get this blank check, no strings attached. Yet kids out of school, how to take out student loans to go to school, they get no help at all. Or what little help they get, they have to ensure that this person really deserves the help. The whole thing is a freaking con. It is just completely insane how corrupt Congress is, and the way everything operates, the way the media operates, the way the media discusses these issues, because they're not calling any of this out. If they're so concerned about not wasting any money, if they're so concerned about deficits, why aren't they calling this garbage out? Why are they only calling it out or only addressing this issue of spending too much when it comes to actually helping people? But corporate giveaways, blank check, who cares? Absolutely insane. Let's get to the last Bernie clip. So this is, he quoted the Intel CEO in his speech. So instead of quoting him, I'm going to show you the actual quote from the Intel CEO on CNBC, and then Bernie's response to the Intel CEO.
But my message to our congressional leaders is, hey, if I'm not done with the job, I don't get to go home. Neither should you. Do not go home for August recess until you have passed the CHIPS Act, because I and others in the industry will make investment decisions. And do you want those investments in the U.S.? Or are we simply not competitiveness to do them here, and we need to go to Europe or Asia for those? Get the job done. Do not go home for August recess without getting these bills passed.
What he is telling you point blank is who is the puppet and who is the puppeteer. Don't go home this August until you give us $176 billion, because if you don't do that, we're going to go to Asia and we're going to go to Europe. That's the state of American politics. And not only American politics, I would say. It's equally true in other countries who are also held hostage by large multinational corporations.
He is telling you who is the puppet and who is the puppeteer. This is the perfect cherry on top to this speech. A perfect metaphor for what Congress is, for how they operate. It's a puppet show. So the lawmakers are the puppets, corporations are the puppeteers. Now, last piece here. This was the clip that is not part of the speech that I saved for the end. This has to do with Nancy Pelosi and this bill. So Nancy Pelosi's husband buys millions of dollars worth of NVIDIA stock, a chip maker, ahead of vote on chip manufacturing bill. Just so happens. They're not talking about it at all. They don't know. There's no connection here. He just so happened to make these investments into NVIDIA, and just has the time that they're going to pass this bill, and there's going to be a huge, massive bonus for NVIDIA. Well, let me play this video of Nancy Pelosi responding to a question about, does she talk to her husband about any of this stuff?
One more, he said. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Over the course of your career, has your husband ever made a stock purchase or sale based on information he's received from you?
What are you saying?
Over the course of your career, has your husband ever made a stock purchase or sale based on information he received from you?
No, absolutely not. Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Have you ever seen a worse lie in your life? And of course, it's not just Pelosi, it's a lot of these individuals. Of course, they work on insider information. That's why a lot of investors follow Nancy Pelosi's husband, because it works out for them. Because obviously, there's a connection here. Obviously, they're talking about this. I mean, the look on her face, the reaction she made, the fact that she was so bad at answering this question and her obvious reaction gave away that she was lying shows you how often or not often this question is asked of them. They are very rarely actually challenged on this issue. So here you have a very clear question with a very obvious answer, and Nancy Pelosi has to ask it twice, or ask the person again to repeat the question to collect her thoughts about how she's going to answer the question, because she knows, of course, he makes investments based on what she knows. Oh my God. And this is, of course, just another part of the corruption. You know, the one part is the bills, the other part is how they actually get rich. It really is all insane. But you have one person, one person in the Senate, Bernie Sanders, standing tall, calling it out. And I really hope, you know, they can add to these numbers in the future. But so far, to only have one person in the Senate calling out how corrupt this institution is, you know, it's great to see it, that somebody is there to call it out, but it's so sad that this is how it operates, and there is very little pushback from either lawmakers or the media against it.